When a watchful cafeteria worker sees a little boy bring the exact same foil-wrapped lunch day after identical day, most might dismiss it as simple habit or a limited menu at home. But when this unwavering routine stretches across weeks and the child appears increasingly withdrawn, barely touching even his familiar meal, the repetition starts to feel less like routine and more like a troubling sign, driving the concerned worker to eventually peel back the foil, uncovering a shocking truth hidden within the mundane wrapping, and exposing the quiet neglect one small boy endured until someone finally dared to look closer. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe every child deserves proper nourishment and care, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. Martha Jenkins knew the rhythms of the Northwood Elementary cafeteria better than she knew her own heartbeat. The surge of hungry energy at 11:45 a.m. sharp, the scrape of chairs, the cacophony of voices bouncing off the high ceilings, the smell of tater tots and industrial-strength disinfectant, it was the landscape of her days. For 19 years, she'd manned the serving line, ladled out sloppy joes, ensured the milk cartons were cold, and wiped down sticky tables with an efficiency born of long practice. She wasn't just a lunch lady, she was a fixture, a constant presence with kind eyes behind sturdy glasses and hands that were surprisingly gentle despite their years of work. Martha lived alone in a small, meticulously clean apartment above a bakery downtown. The rent was reasonable, and the smell of baking bread that drifted up in the mornings was a comfort. It was a quiet life, punctuated by the noise of the school day. She didn't have children of her own, a lingering sadness she rarely acknowledged, but she felt a maternal connection to the hundreds of children who passed through her line each day. She knew their favorites, noticed when they seemed down, occasionally slipped an extra cookie onto a tray for a child who looked like they needed it. Her colleagues were mostly women like her, hard-working, practical, their conversations often revolving around aching feet and the price of groceries. Brenda, who worked the register, was her closest confidant at the school, quick with a wry comment, but possessing a good heart beneath her sometimes gruff exterior. Then there was Mrs. Davison, the school nurse, competent and kind, though perpetually busy with the day's parade of minor injuries and ailments. Martha rarely interacted with the principal, Mr. Gable, beyond a polite nod in the hallway. He seemed preoccupied with budgets and district mandates, operating in a different sphere from the clatter and clang of the cafeteria. The undercurrents of the children's lives outside school sometimes surfaced in fragments, overheard snippets of conversation, a parent looking stressed and haggard at pickup, a child arriving with inadequate winter clothing. Martha noticed these things, filed them away with a sigh, feeling a pang of helplessness. There was only so much a cafeteria worker could do. She focused on providing a warm meal and a brief moment of kindness. The antagonist in this unfolding drama wasn't a person, not yet, but an absence. The absence of care, of attention, symbolized by that unchanging square of foil. Martha had seen the boy's mother once, very early in the school year, during a chaotic drop-off. She remembered a fleeting impression. A young woman looking utterly exhausted, pale, hair scraped back messily, dressed in clothes that looked slept in. She'd murmured something sharp and hurried to the little boy, nudging him forward without meeting anyone's eye before turning quickly away, disappearing into a battered-looking sedan. It was a blink and you'd miss it moment, easily forgotten amidst the morning rush. A subtle crack, perhaps, showing the strain beneath a surface attempting normalcy. The memory only resurfaced later, colored by a growing unease. The cafeteria itself was a microcosm of the elementary school world. Brightly colored, slightly faded posters about nutrition and hand-washing adorned the walls. Long tables filled the space, arranged in neat rows that quickly dissolved into cheerful disarray once the children arrived. The air hummed with the unique energy of hundreds of kids released from classrooms, eager for food and freedom. Martha enjoyed the bustle, the brief interactions, the chance to see the children relax and socialize. She took pride in her work, in keeping her station clean, in ensuring the food presentation was as appealing as possible within the constraints of a school budget. She noticed small details, a new gap-toothed smile, a fancy barrette, sneakers that lit up with every step. She also noticed the quieter children, the ones who sat alone, the ones who picked at their food. It was this habit of quiet observation that first drew her attention to Finn. He was a second grader, small for his age, with serious gray eyes and fine light brown hair that fell into them. He always sat at the end of the same table near the wall, slightly apart from the boisterous groups. And every single day, without fail, he brought his lunch from home, packed in the same way, a small, neat rectangle, wrapped tightly in aluminum foil. It wasn't unusual for kids to bring packed lunches, of course, but Finn's was identical every day, the same size, the same shape, the same meticulous wrapping. Most children with packed lunches had some variety, a thermos one day, a brightly colored lunchbox the next, different snacks peeking out. Finn's foil packet was unchanging, stark in its uniformity. Initially, Martha simply registered it as a minor curiosity. Maybe the family bought sandwich supplies in bulk. Maybe Finn was an exceptionally picky eater who only tolerated one specific thing. But as September turned into October, the sameness started to feel odd, and she began to notice other things. Finn rarely spoke to the children around him. He ate slowly, methodically, unwrapping just enough of the foil to access the contents, then meticulously rewrapping any leftovers before placing the packet back into his worn, characterless backpack. He never seemed excited about lunchtime, never traded snacks, never complained or praised his meal. It was consumed with a quiet, almost somber duty. These were small things, threads of observation, weaving into a nascent tapestry of concern. The unchanging foil packet was the focal point, the constant, but the details around it were beginning to hint at something more. The insistent sameness felt less like routine and more like a lack of variation that mirrored the boy's own subdued presence. Nothing could prepare Martha for the truth that lay hidden within that simple, repeating package. The pattern continued into the colder days of November. The identical foil packet appeared on Finn's tray each lunchtime, a small silver rectangle amidst the colorful chaos of the cafeteria. Martha found her gaze drifting toward his table more frequently. The initial curiosity had curdled into a persistent, low-level anxiety. It wasn't just the sameness of the lunch anymore, it was Finn himself. He seemed paler than he had at the start of the year, his movements slower, more deliberate. The already small boy looked thinner, his clothes seeming to hang more loosely on his slight frame. He often rested his head on his hand while eating, his eyelids drooping slightly. Was he getting enough sleep? Was he feeling all right? One Tuesday, Martha decided to try a gentle intervention. As Finn passed through the line, picking up only his carton of milk, Martha offered him her warmest smile. "Hey there, Finn. Those chicken nuggets look extra crispy today. Would you like to try one?" On the house. She held one out on a napkin, hoping to tempt him. Finn flinched back slightly, his gray eyes widening almost imperceptibly. He shook his head quickly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "No, thank you, Miss Jenkins," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the surrounding din. He clutched his milk carton and hurried towards his usual table, the foil packet already clutched in his other hand. Martha watched him go, a knot tightening in her stomach. It wasn't just pickiness. His reaction felt closer to fear. Fear of accepting something different? Fear of drawing attention? The rejection stung more than she expected, not personally, but because it felt like another closed door, another sign that something wasn't right. She mentioned her concern to Brenda at the register later that day, during a lull between classes. "Have you noticed little Finn, the boy who always brings the foil lunch?" Brenda shrugged, counting out change. Yeah, quiet kid. Always has that sandwich, right? Probably just likes peanut butter. It's every single day, Brenda, Martha persisted, and he seems tired, pale. He wouldn't even take a chicken nugget I offered him. Brenda paused, glancing towards Finn's table, where he sat alone, slowly picking at whatever was inside the foil. Kids are picky, Martha. And maybe his mom works nights. Maybe she's tired too. Don't go borrowing trouble. We see all sorts here. Martha knew Brenda meant well, trying to ease her worry, but the dismissal felt unsatisfying. It didn't align with the persistent unease that gnawed at her. Brenda saw a picky eater. Martha saw a child fading, retreating into himself, his unchanging lunch a symbol of a stagnant, perhaps neglectful, environment. The incident with the chicken nugget spurred Martha to watch Finn even more closely. She started paying attention, not just that he brought the lunch, but how he ate it, or rather, how he didn't eat it. Some days he would unwrap the foil, take a few small bites over the course of the entire lunch period, then carefully rewrap the majority and put it away. Other days he barely unwrapped it at all, just pushed it around on his tray before the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. He never threw the packet away in the cafeteria trash cans. It always went back into his backpack. This observation struck Martha as particularly odd. Most kids tossed their leftover sandwich crusts or apple cores without a second thought. Why was Finn so careful about taking the uneaten food back with him? Was he expected to finish it later? Was he hiding the fact that he wasn't eating? Her internal monologue became a constant stream of questions and anxieties. Why the same lunch? Is it even food? Is he okay? Look how thin his wrists are. He never laughs like the other kids. Why won't he take anything else? Is anyone else noticing this? Am I imagining it? The cafeteria, once a place of familiar routine, now felt like a stage for a silent, worrying play, and she was the only audience member paying attention. The decision to investigate further wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a slow burn of mounting concern. The catalyst was the accumulation of small details, the unwavering routine, the boy's deteriorating appearance and energy levels, his refusal of offered food, the strange habit of taking the uneaten portions home. Each observation was a small weight added to a scale, tipping it slowly but surely towards the unavoidable conclusion that she needed to know more. She needed, somehow, to see inside that foil packet. The thought felt like a transgression, a violation of privacy, but the worry for Finn was becoming stronger than her reluctance to interfere. The stakes felt increasingly high, shifting from simple curiosity to a heavy sense of responsibility for the quiet, fading boy at the end table. The opportunity, when it came, felt almost accidental, yet inevitable. It was a Friday afternoon, the end of a long week. The cafeteria buzzed with pre-weekend energy. Martha was wiping down tables after the main rush, the scent of bleach sharp in the air. Finn's class had already left, heading back for their final period. As Martha cleared the table where Finn usually sat, she noticed something tucked beside the table leg, partially obscured by a dropped napkin. It was the foil packet, small, neat, silver. He must have dropped it accidentally when packing his backpack in his hurry to leave. Her heart gave a strange leap. This was it. The chance to know. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the packet. Her conscience warred with her concern. Opening a child's lunch felt wrong, intrusive. Brenda's voice echoed in her head. Don't go borrowing trouble. But then the image of Finn's pale face, his tired eyes, the way his clothes hung on his small frame, flashed in her mind. The worry, cultivated over weeks of observation, surged, overriding her reluctance. What if it wasn't food at all? What if it was empty? What if it was something awful, something that explained his silence, his sadness? She glanced around. The remaining staff were busy cleaning the kitchen area, their backs turned. No one was watching. With trembling fingers, Martha picked up the foil packet. It felt Light, too light, and there was no smell, none of the faint scent of peanut butter or processed meat that usually clung to packed sandwiches. Her pulse quickened. She carried the packet over to the deserted serving line, shielded from view. She took a deep breath, her hands surprisingly unsteady. Slowly, carefully, she began to unfold the corners of the foil. The metal crinkled softly in the relative quiet of the emptying cafeteria. She peeled back the top layer. Inside, nestled on a stark white dry piece of bread, were two small smooth gray stones. Just stones, the kind a child might pick up from a gravel path or a playground. Below the bread, nothing. No meat, no cheese, no spread. Just another slice of dry, slightly stale-looking white bread. It wasn't a sandwich. It was a mockery of one. A piece of bread, 2 pebbles, and another piece of bread wrapped neatly as if it were a real lunch. Martha stared, horrified, the foil cold against her fingertips. A wave of nausea rolled over her. This wasn't picky eating. This wasn't a limited menu. This was cruel. A deliberate deception. Who would do this? Pack rocks in a child's lunch? The image of Finn's mother, tired and sharp-voiced, flashed again, this time imbued with a chilling significance. Was this her idea of a lunch? Or was it something Finn himself was doing, hiding the fact that there was no lunch provided? Either scenario was heartbreaking, painting a picture of profound neglect. Finn wasn't just not eating, he wasn't being fed. He was bringing this pathetic, symbolic lunch every day, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of fear, pretending to eat while slowly starving. The weeks of observation, the paleness, the lethargy, the refusal of other food, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This discovery was the game changer. The mystery of the foil packet was solved, revealing a reality far worse than she had imagined. The stakes instantly escalated from concern to emergency. Finn needed help, immediately. Holding the opened foil packet, the grim sandwich exposed, Martha felt a surge of cold fury mixed with overwhelming pity. The 2 small stones seemed to stare up at her like vacant eyes. She carefully rewrapped the packet, kneading the evidence exactly as she found it. Her mind raced. Who should she tell? Brenda would be sympathetic now, surely, but this was beyond cafeteria gossip. This needed official intervention. Mrs. Davison? The nurse? Yes, that felt right. Documenting health, malnutrition, that fell under her purview. Or should she go straight to Mr. Gable, the principal? He had the authority to contact Child Protective Services. The internal debate was fierce but brief. Going through the nurse seemed the correct protocol, providing a medical perspective before escalating to administration. The urgency felt immense. Finn had likely just consumed only milk for lunch again. How long had this been going on? How much damage had already been done? The thought of the small boy slowly wasting away while putting on a brave face with his rock sandwich spurred her into action. She tucked the foil packet carefully into the pocket of her apron, its slight weight a heavy burden. She quickly finished her cleanup duties, her movements jerky, her mind preoccupied. She told Brenda she needed to step out for a moment, heading straight for the nurse's office, bypassing the usual staff room chatter. Her heart pounded against her ribs. What if Mrs. Davison didn't believe her? What if she thought Martha was overreacting, misinterpreting? She clutched the foil packet in her pocket, the hard outline of the stones pressing against her thigh. Grim proof. The walk felt longer than usual, the familiar school hallways seeming alien, charged with the weight of her discovery. She found Mrs. Davison at her desk, updating student health records. The nurse looked up, her expression professionally welcoming, then shifting slightly as she registered Martha's obvious distress. "Martha, is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Martha closed the door behind her, the click echoing in the small, quiet office. "I need to show you something, Carol," Martha said, her voice trembling slightly. She pulled the foil packet from her pocket and placed it on the desk between them. "It's Finn, the second grader. He brings this every day." Mrs. Davison looked at the packet, then back at Martha, puzzled. "His lunch?" "Just open it," Martha urged, her voice tight. Mrs. Davison, her brow furrowed with curiosity now tinged with Martha's palpable anxiety, carefully unfolded the foil. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then horror, as she saw the contents, the dry bread, the 2 small stones. She looked up at Martha, speechless for a moment. "Rocks?" she whispered, appalled. Martha quickly recounted her observations, the unchanging lunch, Finn's withdrawal, his paleness, his lethargy, finding the dropped packet, the discovery. She explained how he always took the uneaten portions home, how he refused other food. Mrs. Davison listened intently, her professional demeanor clicking into place over her initial shock. She picked up one of the small stones, turning it over in her fingers. "My God, Martha, this is deliberate." She gently placed the stone back on the bread. "This constitutes severe neglect. Likely medical neglect, too, given his appearance you described. We have to report this immediately." The validation was instant. Terrifying relief washing over Martha. She wasn't imagining things. The situation was as dire as she feared. Mrs. Davison was already reaching for the phone, her expression grimly determined. "I'm calling Principal Gable first, then CPS. We need to get Finn assessed right away. Can you stay here with this?" She indicated the foil packet. Martha nodded, sinking into the visitor chair, clutching the arms rests. The waiting began, thick with tension. Mrs. Davison spoke calmly but firmly on the phone to the principal, explaining the situation, requesting his immediate presence. While they waited for Mr. Gable, Mrs. Davison asked Martha more questions, documenting her observations meticulously. Dates, times, specific behaviors noted. Each detail added weight to the grim picture. Mr. Gable arrived within minutes, his usual preoccupied air replaced by one of grave concern, as Mrs. Davison quickly briefed him, showing him the sandwich. He looked shaken, his face paling as he stared at the stones. I had no idea," he stammered, looking at Martha. "Thank you, Martha, for noticing, for acting." He immediately authorized the call to Child Protective Services, agreeing that Finn needed to be seen urgently, potentially pulled from his last class for an initial assessment. Mrs. Davison made the call, relaying the information with practiced efficiency. The nature of the neglect, the physical evidence, the observed symptoms of malnutrition and withdrawal. The mother's brief stressed appearance earlier in the year as potential context. The CPS operator assured them a caseworker would be dispatched as quickly as possible, possibly within the hour. The plan was for the caseworker to meet with Finn in Mrs. Davison's office, creating a safe, confidential space. The ramp-up to the confrontation wasn't with the antagonist directly, but with the system designed to protect children. Martha, armed with the undeniable proof of the foil packet, had initiated the intervention. Now they had to wait, hoping help would arrive before the end of the school day, before Finn had to take his secret burden home once more. The quiet nurse's office felt like the calm before a necessary storm. The final hour of the school day ticked by with agonizing slowness. Martha remained in the nurse's office, the foil packet sitting on the desk like a terrible accusation. Mrs. Davison prepped a quiet side room for the caseworker's arrival, ensuring privacy. Mr. Gable alerted Finn's classroom teacher, a young woman named Miss Evans, asking her to send Finn down to the nurse's office shortly before dismissal, using the pretext of a routine health check follow-up to avoid alarming him. Every step was taken with careful consideration for the boy's emotional state. Martha's mind replayed the moment she unfolded the foil, the cold shock of seeing the stones. She felt a mixture of dread and fierce protectiveness. What would happen to Finn now? Where would he go? Would his mother be angry? Would there be repercussions? Just before the dismissal bell rang, a calm professional woman arrived, Ms. Diaz, the CPS caseworker. After a brief, hushed conference with Mr. Gable and Mrs. Davison, she prepared to meet Finn. Minutes later, Miss Evans walked Finn down the hallway. He looked small and confused, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Mrs. Davison met him at the door with a gentle smile. "Hi, Finn. Ms. Diaz is just going to chat with you for a few minutes, okay? Right in here." Finn glanced nervously towards Martha, who offered him a small, shaky smile of reassurance. He hesitated, then allowed Mrs. Davison to guide him into the side room where Ms. Diaz waited. The door closed softly behind them. Martha, Mrs. Davison, and Mr. Gable waited in the main office area. The silence was thick, broken only by the muffled sounds of the school emptying out for the day. Bells ringing, lockers slamming, excited chatter fading down the hallways. Martha twisted her hands in her lap, her gaze fixed on the closed door. She strained to hear anything, any indication of how the conversation was going, but there was nothing. Her internal struggle was immense. Relief that action was being taken, mingled with anxiety about the process and Finn's well-being. She had done her part, brought the darkness to light, but the waiting, the uncertainty of the outcome, was excruciating. After what felt like an age, but was probably only 20 minutes, Ms. Diaz emerged, her expression serious, but compassionate. "He's a very resilient little boy," she said quietly to the waiting adults, "but it's clear there's significant neglect." He corroborated in his own way that the lunch is often like this, or sometimes just the foil. "He seems malnourished and emotionally withdrawn. I've already been in contact with my supervisor and law enforcement liaison. Given the nature of the situation, we'll be taking Finn into protective custody immediately, pending a full investigation and assessment." The words hung in the air. Protective custody. Necessary, vital, yet heartbreaking. Mrs. Davison nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. Mr. Gable cleared his throat, looking visibly distressed but resolute. "Whatever you need, Ms. Diaz, school resources, records, anything." Ms. Diaz explained that arrangements were being made for Finn to go to an emergency foster placement, where he would receive immediate medical attention and care. She would handle contacting the mother. The decisive turning point arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet, methodical efficiency of the child protection system activating. Finn emerged from the room holding Ms. Diaz's hand, looking bewildered but strangely calm, as if sensing a shift, even if he didn't understand it. He carried his worn backpack. Ms. Diaz knelt beside him. "Finn, you're going to come with me for a little while to a safe place where they'll make sure you get lots of yummy food and feel better, okay?" Finn looked at her, then his gaze flickered towards Martha. Martha met his eyes, offering a genuine, albeit watery, smile. "It's okay, Finn," she whispered. He didn't speak, but held her gaze for a moment longer than usual, a silent understanding passing between them. Then he nodded slowly at Ms. Diaz. The triumph was muted, heavy with the reality of the situation, but profound. Martha had seen, she had acted, and now Finn was safe. The immediate threat of starvation and neglect was being addressed. The emotional cost was palpable, the violation of innocence, the confrontation with such bleak disregard for a child. But the overwhelming sense was one of grim, necessary relief. The system, alerted by her quiet observation, was finally intervening. In the quiet moments after Ms. Diaz had left with Finn, promising to keep the school informed, Martha finally let the tears she'd been holding back spill over. Relief, exhaustion, and a deep, aching sadness washed through her. Mrs. Davison put a comforting arm around her shoulder. "You did good, Martha. You did a very brave, very right thing." Mr. Gable echoed the sentiment, expressing his gratitude again. The immediate emotional aftermath was a quiet release of tension in the now empty nurse's office. News of the situation prompted the school administration, spurred by Mr. Gable's shock, to quickly implement new guidelines. They enhanced training for all staff, including lunch monitors and support personnel, on recognizing subtle signs of neglect and malnutrition, and established a clearer, more confidential internal system for reporting concerns directly to the nurse or counselors, ensuring observations like Martha's wouldn't be easily dismissed in the future. A week later, Mrs. Davison shared an update with Martha. Finn was doing well in his foster placement. He was receiving medical care, gaining a little weight, and beginning to engage cautiously with his foster parents. He was safe. He was being cared for. The investigation into his mother's situation was ongoing. It seemed she was struggling with severe issues of her own, overwhelmed and unable to cope, leading to profound neglect rather than active malice, though the impact on Finn was no less severe. There was a long road ahead for him involving therapy and consistent care to address the physical and emotional effects of the neglect. Recovery wouldn't be instant, but the foundation for safety had finally been laid, allowing the slow work of healing to begin. One afternoon, a few weeks after the incident, Martha was wiping down tables when she saw a familiar figure near the cafeteria entrance, Mrs. Davison, accompanied by Finn, and a kind-faced woman Martha assumed was his foster mother. Finn looked different. Still small, still quiet, but there was a touch more color in his cheeks. His eyes seemed less haunted, and he stood a little taller. He saw Martha and stopped. His foster mother smiled encouragingly. Finn took a hesitant step towards Martha. He didn't say anything, but he reached out and gently touched her hand where it rested on the table. Then he offered a small, tentative smile, the first genuine smile Martha had ever seen from him. He held up a bright red apple, offering it to her. Martha's breath caught. She knelt down slightly. "For me? Thank you, Finn. That's beautiful." He nodded, his smile widening slightly before turning back to his foster mother. In that silent exchange, that small offering of fruit, Martha understood. She hadn't just uncovered a secret, she had helped restore a childhood. The path ahead was challenging, but for the first time, the possibility of nourishment, in every sense of the word, felt real and attainable for Finn. Martha returned to her routine in the cafeteria, the clatter and noise settling back into familiar patterns. But her perspective had irrevocably changed. She found herself watching the children with a renewed sense of vigilance and purpose, her quiet observations now feeling less like passive habit and more like a vital part of the safety net. The memory of the foil packet, the cold stones, remained a stark reminder of the hidden struggles some children endure. But the image that truly stayed with her, the one she held on to, was Finn's tentative smile, the offering of the apple, a small, bright symbol of hope rediscovered. Her quiet life, her steady job, felt imbued with a deeper significance. She was more than just a lunch lady. She was a watchful guardian, a quiet force ensuring that, at least within these walls, every child was seen and every child mattered. She continued her work, ladling soup, wiping tables, her kind eyes scanning the room, finding a quiet satisfaction in her unwavering presence. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.
When a veteran elementary school principal notices a first grader disappearing into the bathroom at the same time every day, what begins as concern over a possible health issue unravels into a disturbing pattern that will shake an entire community to its core. The quiet 6-year-old's daily disappearances would reveal a secret so devastating that even hardened police officers would struggle to maintain their composure. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe in speaking up when something doesn't feel right, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. Principal Michael Sanders had been in education for 23 years, but nothing prepared him for what he discovered the day he decided to follow little Ethan Williams into the boys' bathroom. The September sun slanted through the windows of Oak Ridge Elementary, casting long shadows across the hallway floor as Principal Michael Sanders made his afternoon rounds. At 52, Michael carried himself with the calm authority that came from more than 2 decades in education. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed. His button-down shirt and tie a concession to professionalism while still allowing him to crouch down to a child's level when necessary. The students of Oak Ridge knew him as firm but fair, someone who remembered their names, celebrated their achievements, and helped navigate their struggles with equal attention. As he turned the corner toward the first-grade classrooms, Michael checked his watch, 2:15 p.m. Like clockwork, a small figure emerged from Ms. Preston's room, hall pass clutched tightly in one hand. Ethan Williams, 6 years old and unusually small even for his age, moved with the careful deliberation of someone trying to avoid notice. His oversized blue sweater hung from narrow shoulders, and his eyes remained fixed on the floor as he made his way to the boys' bathroom. Michael frowned slightly. This was the third time this week he'd noticed Ethan making the same trip at exactly the same time. Initially, he'd assumed it was a bathroom schedule established for a child with health issues, not uncommon for young students still adjusting to school routines. But something about Ethan's demeanor, the hunched shoulders, the careful timing, the extended absences, had begun to trigger Michael's well-honed educational instincts. "Everything okay, Ethan?" Michael asked, his voice gentle as he approached the boy. Ethan startled visibly, his head jerking up momentarily before dropping again. "Yes, sir," he mumbled, fingers tightening around the laminated hall pass. "Just going to the bathroom." "Of course," Michael replied, keeping his tone casual despite the concern blooming in his chest.
"No rush."
He watched as Ethan disappeared into the bathroom, noting how the boy glanced back over his shoulder before letting the door swing closed. Rather than continuing his rounds, Michael lingered in the hallway, checking emails on his phone to provide a plausible reason for his presence. 5 minutes passed, then 10. By the 15-minute mark, Michael's concern had deepened considerably. Even accounting for a first grader's sometimes inefficient bathroom skills, this was an unusually long absence from class. He was about to check on Ethan when Ms. Preston appeared in her classroom doorway, a stack of papers in her hands. "Oh, Mr. Sanders," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I was just heading to the copy room. Have you seen Ethan by chance? He's been gone quite a while." "He went into the bathroom about 15 minutes ago," Michael informed her. "I was just about to check on him." Ms. Preston's brow furrowed. "This has been happening pretty regularly," she confided, lowering her voice. "Same time every day, and he's always gone for at least 20 minutes. I've asked if he's feeling sick or needs to see the nurse, but he insists he's fine. I thought maybe he was having digestive issues, you know? Some kids that age are embarrassed to talk about it." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I'll check on him. Why don't you go ahead with your copying? I'll make sure he gets back to class." After Miss Preston departed, Michael approached the bathroom door and knocked gently. "Ethan, it's Mr. Sanders. Are you all right in there?" Silence followed, then a shuffling sound. "I'm okay," came the muffled reply, strain evident in the small voice. "I'll come out soon." "Take your time," Michael replied, his concern deepening at the obvious distress in Ethan's voice. "I'll wait out here for you." Another 5 minutes passed before the bathroom door finally opened. Ethan emerged, his face pale and damp as if he'd splashed it with water. The shoulders of his sweater were wet as well, dark patches spreading across the blue fabric. "Sorry," the boy mumbled, gaze fixed firmly on his sneakers. Michael crouched down, bringing himself to Ethan's eye level. "No need to apologize. I just wanted to make sure you're feeling okay. That's a long time to spend in the bathroom." Ethan nodded quickly, too quickly. "I'm fine. Can I go back to class now?" There was something in his voice, a forced steadiness that seemed out of place coming from a 6-year-old, that strengthened Michael's unease. Years of working with children had attuned him to the subtle signs that something wasn't right. The too careful responses, the avoidance of eye contact, the rigid control of emotions that children typically expressed more freely. "Of course," Michael said, straightening up. "Let me walk you back." As they moved down the hallway together, Michael noticed how Ethan maintained a careful distance between them. Another small warning flag. Most first graders were either completely unselfconscious about personal space or occasionally overly familiar, leaning against adults or reaching for hands automatically. Ethan's precise, measured distance suggested a deliberate effort to avoid physical proximity. At the classroom door, Michael paused. "Ethan, if you're ever not feeling well or if something's bothering you, my door is always open. Do you understand?" For the briefest moment, Ethan's eyes lifted to meet his, deep brown and filled with something that made Michael's heart constrict, before dropping back to the floor. "Yes, sir," he said quietly before slipping back into the classroom. That evening, Michael sat at his kitchen table. The day's paperwork spread before him, but his mind still focused on Ethan Williams. After 23 years in education, including 15 as a principal, he had developed a sort of professional intuition about students in trouble. Something about Ethan's behavior had triggered that internal alarm system: the extended bathroom visits at the same time each day, the careful avoidance of physical contact, the controlled responses that seemed rehearsed rather than natural. He pulled Ethan's file from his briefcase, reviewing the information he'd gathered after returning to his office. Ethan had transferred to Oak Ridge at the beginning of the school year, just 6 weeks earlier. His previous school was listed as a private academy in a neighboring town. His academic records showed slightly above average performance, with teacher comments noting he was quiet but compliant and adjusts well to classroom routines. His emergency contact information listed his father, Dr. Robert Williams, as primary contact, with a stepmother, Vanessa Williams, as secondary. There was no mention of Ethan's biological mother in the file, no custody arrangements, no indication of whether she was deceased or simply not involved. The family had moved to the district over the summer, with Dr. Williams taking a position as head of orthopedic surgery at Memorial Hospital. Michael made some notes, then sent an email to Jennifer Carson, the school counselor, asking if she'd had any interactions with Ethan that might provide insight. As he closed the file, he made a mental note to observe Ethan more closely over the coming days. Not just during the mysterious bathroom breaks, but throughout his school day. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The following morning, Michael was called to assist with a minor playground issue involving third graders when he spotted Ethan sitting alone on a bench at the edge of the play area. While the other first graders raced around the equipment, engaged in elaborate games of tag or climbing challenges, Ethan remained perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, watching but never participating. Michael resolved the third grade dispute quickly, then made his way to Ethan's bench, approaching with deliberate casualness. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. Ethan tensed visibly but nodded, scooting marginally further away as Michael sat down. "Not interested in playing today?" Michael inquired conversationally. Ethan shrugged. "I like watching." "I see," Michael nodded. "I used to do that sometimes when I was your age. It can be fun to see what everyone else is doing." For a few minutes, they sat in silence, observing the controlled chaos of elementary recess. Then Michael spoke again, keeping his tone light. "I noticed you spend some time in the bathroom every afternoon. Is everything okay?" The change was immediate and alarming. Ethan's small body went rigid, his fingers clutching the edge of the bench with white-knuckled intensity. "I'm fine," he said, the words coming out strained and mechanical. "Sometimes my stomach hurts a little." "I see," Michael replied carefully. "Have you told your dad or your stepmom about your stomach hurting?" Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the distant playground. "Dad says I need to toughen up, not be a baby about things." The response, delivered in that same flat tone, sent a chill through Michael. "Does your stomach hurt at home too, or just at school?" A long pause followed. "Just at school," Ethan finally answered, but something in his voice suggested a lie carefully constructed. "You know," Michael said gently, "sometimes our bodies feel bad when our minds are worried about something. When I get nervous about a big meeting, my stomach gets all knotted up too." For the first time, Ethan turned slightly toward him, a flicker of genuine curiosity breaking through his careful reserve. "Really? Even grown-ups?" "Even principals," Michael confirmed with a small smile. "Is there something at school that makes you nervous, Ethan?" The boy's expression shuddered again, the momentary openness vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "No, sir. I like school. Can I go play now? Recognizing he'd pushed as far as he could for the moment, Michael nodded. Of course. Rather than joining the other children, however, Ethan simply moved to a different bench, slightly further from the main playground area. The isolation was striking and not typical for a first grader. Most children his age, even shy ones, at least gravitated toward the periphery of play, observing from close proximity with the hope of eventual inclusion. Ethan's deliberate distance suggested something beyond ordinary shyness. When Michael returned to his office, he found a response from Jennifer Carson, the school counselor, waiting in his inbox. Haven't had much interaction with Ethan yet. During my classroom visit last week, he participated minimally. Teacher reports he rarely speaks unless directly addressed, completes work efficiently but without enthusiasm. No parent requests for services. Would you like me to schedule a check-in? Michael replied affirmatively, suggesting Jennifer try to connect with Ethan before the end of the week. Then he pulled up the school database, checking attendance records. Ethan had missed 3 days of school already this year, all Mondays, all reported by his stepmother as minor illness again. Not necessarily unusual for a first grader adjusting to a new school and exposure to new germs, but another small piece of a concerning pattern. That afternoon, Michael rearranged his schedule to be in the hallway outside Miss Preston's class at 2:15. Like clockwork, Ethan emerged with his hall pass and made his way to the bathroom. This time, Michael waited a few minutes before following, knocking gently on the bathroom door before entering. Ethan, it's Mr. Sanders. Just checking if you're okay. Silence greeted him. The bathroom appeared empty at first glance. All stall doors open except the last one, which was firmly closed. From within came a muffled sound that might have been crying, quickly stifled. Ethan, I can hear that you're upset. Would you like to come out and talk about it?
No.
The response was sharp, tinged with panic. I'm fine. Please go away. Michael leaned against the wall, keeping his voice steady and non-threatening. I'm worried about you, Ethan. This is the 4th day in a row you've spent a long time in here, and it sounds like you're crying. That makes me think something is wrong. Nothing's wrong, came the reply, but the words were choked, unconvincing. I just need a minute. Okay, Michael agreed. I'll give you some space. But Ethan, if someone is hurting you or making you feel unsafe, it's my job to help. That's what principals do. We keep students safe. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of muffled sniffling. Finally, Ethan's small voice came through the door. No one would believe me. The words landed like a physical blow. I would believe you, Ethan, Michael said firmly. I promise. She said no one would, Ethan whispered, so quietly Michael had to strain to hear. She said Dad would choose her, not me, and then I'd get sent away forever. Michael's professional composure nearly broke at the fear evident in those words. Ethan, I don't know who told you that, but it's not true. If someone is hurting you, there are many people whose job it is to keep you safe. Another long silence followed. Then the toilet flushed, and water ran briefly in the sink before the stall door finally opened. Ethan emerged, his face blotchy from crying, the collar of his shirt damp from what appeared to be his attempts to wash away the evidence of tears. Can we talk in my office? Michael asked gently. It's quiet there, and we won't be interrupted. Ethan looked up at him, uncertainty warring with what might have been the faintest glimmer of hope. After a long moment, he gave a small nod. In the principal's office, with the door left partially open for both propriety and to help Ethan feel safe, Michael offered the boy a juice box from the small refrigerator he kept stocked for precisely these kinds of situations. Ethan, he began carefully once the boy had settled into the oversized chair across from his desk. I've noticed that you seem sad a lot of the time, and what you said in the bathroom, about someone saying no one would believe you, that worries me very much. Ethan stared at his juice box, poking the straw in and out without drinking. I'm not supposed to talk about home stuff, he said finally. It's private. That's what Vanessa says. Your stepmom, Michael clarified gently. Ethan nodded, still not making eye contact. Generally, that's true, Michael acknowledged. Family matters are private. But there's a very important exception. If someone in your home is hurting you, that's not supposed to be kept private. Ethan's fingers tightened around the juice box, causing liquid to spurt up through the straw. I need to go back to class, he said suddenly, the familiar flat tone returning. Ms. Preston will be looking for me. Recognizing the retreat, Michael didn't push further. I've let Ms. Preston know you're with me, but we can continue this conversation another time if you'd prefer. Relief flashed across Ethan's face, followed immediately by wariness. Are you going to call my dad? Or Vanessa? Not right now, Michael assured him. But Ethan, if I believe you're being hurt, I will need to make sure you get help. That's my job, and it's the law. Fear crept back into the boy's expression. She said that too, that they'd come and take me away, and I'd never see my dad again. That's not how it works, Michael explained gently. The goal is always to keep families together safely. But to do that, we need to know what's happening. Ethan set the juice box on the edge of the desk, his movements deliberate. Can I go now? Please. Michael recognized he'd reached the limit of what this initial conversation could accomplish. Yes, you can go. But Ethan, my door is always open to you. And tomorrow I'd like you to meet Ms. Carson, our school counselor. She helps kids with all kinds of feelings and problems. When Ethan had gone, Michael documented their conversation with painstaking accuracy. The boy hadn't disclosed specific abuse, but the warning signs were significant. The isolation, the extended bathroom visits that appeared to be crying sessions, the references to his stepmother telling him he wouldn't be believed and would be taken away, classic manipulation tactics used to silence children. Combined with the Monday absences, often indicative of injuries inflicted over the weekend being allowed to heal before the child returned to school. Michael felt justified in escalating his concerns. He placed a call to Jennifer Carson, bringing her up to speed on his observations and asking her to see Ethan first thing the following morning. Then, following standard protocol, he contacted the county's Child Protective Services to report suspected emotional abuse, at minimum, with concerns about possible physical abuse as well. The intake worker took his information but warned him that without specific disclosures or visible injuries, they would likely begin with a family evaluation rather than immediate intervention. Document everything, she advised. If the child makes more specific disclosures or if you observe any concerning physical marks, call us immediately. We'll get someone out to the school right away in that case. The following morning, Jennifer texted Michael that Ethan hadn't come to school. His stepmother had called the attendance line reporting he had a stomach virus. Convenient timing, Michael remarked when Jennifer stopped by his office later. First absence that's not a Monday, right after our conversation about things not being right at home. Exactly what I was thinking, Jennifer agreed, her expression troubled. I've got a video conference this afternoon, but I'm free all Monday. I'll make him my priority if he's back then. Monday came, but Ethan didn't. Another call from his stepmother, this time reporting he was still recovering from his illness. By Tuesday morning, Michael's concern had escalated to alarm. 2 consecutive absences immediately following a conversation that had clearly frightened the boy, combined with the previous pattern of Monday absences, suggested Ethan might have been kept home to prevent him from making further disclosures. After consulting with Jennifer, Michael made a decision that pushed the boundaries of his role, but felt necessary given the circumstances. He would visit the Williams home under the guise of dropping off schoolwork, checking on a student with an extended absence, a courtesy the school occasionally extended to families, particularly those new to the district. The Williams residence was an impressive colonial in the most exclusive neighborhood within the school boundaries. Michael parked his modest sedan behind a luxury SUV in the circular driveway and approached the imposing front door, a folder of worksheets in hand. The woman who answered his knock was stunning in the carefully curated way that suggested significant time and money invested in her appearance. Sleek blonde hair fell to her shoulders, framing a face with just enough cosmetic enhancement to look perpetually camera-ready. Her smile was practiced but didn't reach her eyes, which narrowed slightly as she took in Michael's appearance. "May I help you?" she asked, one manicured hand resting on the door as if prepared to close it. "Mrs. Williams? I'm Michael Sanders, the principal at Oak Ridge Elementary. I've brought some work for Ethan, since he's been out for a few days. We like to make sure our students don't fall behind when they're ill." Something flickered across her perfect features. Surprise, quickly masked by a tightening of her smile. How thoughtful. "Ethan is still quite under the weather, I'm afraid. Some sort of stomach bug that's just not letting go." "I'm sorry to hear that," Michael replied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the growing knot of suspicion in his stomach. "Has he been seen by a doctor? 3 days is a long time for a child his age to be ill without medical attention." The smile remained fixed, but frost crept into her tone. "My husband is a doctor, Mr. Sanders. Ethan is receiving excellent care right here at home." "Of course," Michael nodded. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Is Ethan awake? I'd love to say a quick hello. Let him know his classmates miss him." "He's finally sleeping after a rough morning," she replied smoothly. "I wouldn't want to wake him, but I'll be sure to tell him you stopped by." Michael handed over the folder. "These are the assignments he's missed. Nothing too challenging, but Ms. Preston thought it might give him something to do as he recovers." "How considerate," Vanessa Williams said, taking the folder without opening it. "Was there anything else?" "Actually," Michael said, making a split-second decision, "I've been meaning to ask about Ethan's emergency contact information. We tried calling the number listed for Dr. Williams yesterday when updating our records, but couldn't reach him. The lie was a calculated risk, but it produced an interesting result." Vanessa's carefully composed expression faltered momentarily. "Robert is in surgery most days. You should have called me." "We did," Michael continued smoothly, "but the number listed for you went to voicemail as well. I wonder if we could update those numbers while I'm here." "The numbers on file are correct," she said, her tone clipped. "Robert's secretary screens his calls during surgery, and I was likely with Ethan or running errands. We do check messages, Mr. Sanders." "Of course," he acknowledged. "One last thing. Ethan seemed a bit withdrawn at school last week. I had a nice chat with him on Thursday. Did he mention it?" The change was subtle but unmistakable. A tightening around her eyes, a slight whitening of her knuckles where they gripped the folder. "Ethan tends to be shy. It's just his nature. If there's nothing else, I should check on him." "No, nothing else," Michael confirmed, offering his business card. "Please let us know if there's anything we can do to help Ethan recover quickly. We miss having him at school." As he returned to his car, Michael made mental notes of everything about the interaction that had intensified his concerns. Vanessa's defensive reaction to simple questions, her unwillingness to let him see Ethan even briefly, the momentary breaks in her composed facade when he mentioned speaking with Ethan. None of it constituted proof of abuse, but it strengthened his conviction that something wasn't right in the Williams household. Back at school, Michael compared notes with Jennifer and consulted again with CPS, updating them on Ethan's continued absence and his observations from the home visit. The intake worker he spoke with promised to escalate the case, but warned him that without specific disclosures or observable injuries, there were limits to what they could do. "Keep documenting," she advised. "If he returns to school, try to establish whether he has any physical injuries. If he makes any specific disclosures, call us immediately." Ethan returned to school on Wednesday, appearing pale and subdued even by his usual standards. Michael made a point of being visible during the morning drop-off, watching as Dr. Williams, a tall, distinguished-looking man in surgical scrubs, escorted Ethan to the entrance. There was no physical interaction between them. No hug, no pat on the shoulder, not even a verbal goodbye that Michael could observe. Ethan simply nodded at whatever his father said, then walked into the building with the same careful, measured steps Michael had noted before. Jennifer Carson intercepted Ethan for their rescheduled meeting first thing that morning. She texted Michael afterward with concerning observations. Ethan had been largely non-responsive during their session, refusing to engage with therapeutic games or art materials. He denied being sad or scared, denied any problems at home, and provided wrote, positive descriptions of both his father and stepmother when asked directly about them. His affect had been flat throughout, his body language closed and defensive. Most significantly, he'd been dressed in long sleeves and pants despite the warm weather, and had refused to remove his sweater even when Jennifer commented that the room was warm. By now, Michael's concern had evolved into a deep conviction that Ethan was being abused in some form, most likely by his stepmother, with his father either complicit or deliberately blind to the situation. The challenge was obtaining enough concrete evidence for CPS to intervene effectively. Without specific disclosures from Ethan or observable injuries, the case might drag on for weeks or months of investigation while Ethan remained in a dangerous environment. The break came later that same day, during Ethan's now predictable 2:15 bathroom visit. Michael, having cleared his afternoon schedule to focus on this situation, was in the hallway when Ethan emerged from his classroom. He waited until the boy had entered the bathroom, then followed after giving him a few minutes alone. This time, when Michael entered, the sound of muffled crying was clearly audible from the last stall. "Ethan? It's Mr. Sanders. May I come in?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by the sounds of frantic movement. "I'm okay," came Ethan's voice, thick with tears. "Please go away." "Ethan, I can hear that you're upset," Michael said gently. "I'm worried about you. Would you please come out so we can talk?" "I can't," the boy replied, a note of panic entering his voice. "I'm not supposed to talk to anyone. She said she'd know if I did." Michael moved closer to the stall door, keeping his voice low and steady. "Ethan, no one can know what you tell me unless you or I tell them. And I promise, I'm only interested in making sure you're safe." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of Ethan's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, the lock on the stall door clicked open. What Michael saw when the door swung inward stopped his breath. Ethan stood with his sweater removed, revealing arms mottled with bruises in various stages of healing. Most disturbing was a clearly defined handprint encircling his upper arm. The finger marks a deep purple against his pale skin. But it was the burn mark on his forearm, a small circular wound that appeared to be from a cigarette, that finally broke through Michael's professional composure. "Oh, Ethan," he breathed, kneeling down to the boy's level but careful not to touch him. "Who did this to you?" Tears spilled down Ethan's cheeks as the carefully constructed wall of silence finally crumbled. "Vanessa," he whispered, "but you can't tell. She said if I told anyone, she'd hurt me worse, and Dad would believe her, not me. She said I'd get sent away forever." "Ethan, look at me," Michael said gently, waiting until the boy's tear-filled eyes met his. "What Vanessa is doing is wrong. It's against the law, and it is never, ever your fault. No matter what she says, you do not deserve to be hurt." "She says I'm bad," Ethan whispered, "that I make too much noise, or I eat too much, or I mess up her things. She says Dad doesn't want a crybaby for a son." "You are not bad," Michael stated firmly. "You're a child. Children make noise, they need food, they sometimes make mistakes. Real grown-ups understand that. What Vanessa is doing isn't discipline, it's abuse." Ethan's eyes widened at the word, as if hearing it applied to his situation for the first time. "Ethan, I need to get help for you right away," Michael continued. "That means I need to take some pictures of your injuries and call some people whose job it is to protect children. Would that be okay?" Fear flashed across the boy's face. "Will they take me away from my dad?" "I don't know exactly what will happen," Michael answered honestly, "but I do know they'll make sure you're safe. And that's the most important thing right now." After a moment's hesitation, Ethan nodded, his small shoulders sagging as if releasing a tremendous burden. What followed was a carefully orchestrated process, with Jennifer Carson joining them to provide additional support and witness. Using the school's documentation camera, they photographed Ethan's injuries, with Jennifer taking careful notes about what Ethan shared about each one, when and how it had happened, what had allegedly prompted it, who had been present. The burn, Ethan explained in a small voice, had been punishment for spilling juice on the living room carpet 3 days earlier. The bruises on his arms came from being grabbed and shaken when he'd cried afterward. "And your dad?" Michael asked gently. "Does he know about this?" Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor. "He's at work a lot. When he's home, Vanessa acts different. Nice. And when I tried to tell him once about her being mean, he said I needed to try harder to get along with her, that she was doing her best to be a good mom to me." The familiar pattern was heartbreaking. A child caught between an abusive step-parent and a biological parent unwilling or unable to see the truth. Whether Dr. Williams was deliberately ignoring the abuse or genuinely unaware due to his absence and his wife's careful performance around him would be for CPS to determine. What mattered now was getting Ethan to safety. With the evidence documented, Michael placed the call to CPS, requesting immediate intervention. The photographs of Ethan's injuries, combined with his disclosures and the detailed documentation of behavioral concerns over the preceding weeks, were enough to trigger an emergency response. Within the hour, a CPS caseworker named Teresa Martinez arrived at the school, along with a police officer from the department's Family Services Unit. Teresa's interview with Ethan was gentle but thorough, confirming the details he'd already shared with Michael and Jennifer while exploring whether the abuse extended beyond his stepmother. Though he maintained his father had never physically hurt him, Teresa noted the emotional neglect inherent in his descriptions of their relationship, the dismissal of his concerns, the pressure to toughen up, the extended absences that left him alone with his abuser. "We'll need to take Ethan to be examined at the Children's Advocacy Center," Teresa explained afterward. "They have medical staff specifically trained in documenting abuse. Based on what I've seen, we'll be seeking emergency removal and temporary placement while we investigate further." "Will you need me to be present when you speak with the parents?" Michael asked, already anticipating the confrontation to come. "Not initially," Teresa replied. "We'll coordinate with the police to ensure safety during the notification. Dr. Williams will be informed at the hospital, and Mrs. Williams will be approached at home with officer support. Once we've secured Ethan's safety, we may need you to participate in family court proceedings if this goes to a hearing." As they prepared to transport Ethan to the advocacy center, Michael knelt once more to the boy's level. "Ethan, I'm very proud of you for telling us the truth today. That took incredible courage." Ethan looked at him with eyes too old for his 6 years. "Are you sure they won't send me away forever? That's what Vanessa said would happen." "I'm absolutely sure," Michael answered firmly. "Ms. Martinez is going to make sure you stay somewhere safe while grown-ups figure out how to make your home safe for you too." "Can I come back to school?" Ethan asked, his voice small. "I like school." "Of course," Michael assured him. "Your place here will be waiting for you, no matter what." As Teresa led Ethan toward the exit, the boy looked back over his shoulder. "Thank you for following me," he said softly. "No one else did." Those simple words would stay with Michael through the complex aftermath. The investigations, the court hearings, the gradual unraveling of the Williams family dynamics. Vanessa Williams was arrested that same day, charged with child abuse and endangerment. Robert Williams, initially shocked and defensive, eventually acknowledged he had chosen long hours at work over facing problems at home, allowing himself to be manipulated by his wife's careful portrayal of Ethan as troubled and difficult. Ethan was placed temporarily with a foster family specializing in trauma care, while his father participated in parenting classes and therapy. The healing would be neither quick nor linear. The physical wounds would fade long before the emotional ones began to mend. But 6 weeks later, when Ethan returned to Oak Ridge Elementary, the change was already visible. He no longer flinched when adults approached, no longer hid in the bathroom to cry, no longer carried himself with the rigid control of a child expecting punishment at any moment. On his first day back, he stopped by Michael's office before heading to class. "My new counselor says I should thank people who helped me," he said, his voice stronger than Michael had ever heard it. "So thank you for not believing Vanessa when she said I was bad." "You never were bad, Ethan," Michael replied gently, "and I'm very glad you're back with us." The case had changed Oak Ridge Elementary in subtle but significant ways. Training for teachers on recognizing signs of abuse had been enhanced. Communication protocols between the school and child protective services had been streamlined. Most importantly, every adult in the building had been reminded that sometimes, The most crucial thing they could do for a child was simply to notice, to see past the careful facades, to follow when something didn't seem right, to believe a child's truth even when it was painful to hear. As Michael watched Ethan walk confidently toward his classroom, he reflected on how a simple observation, a boy disappearing into the bathroom at the same time every day, had led to uncovering a truth that might have remained hidden for years. In education, as in life, it was often the small details that mattered most, the tiny clues that, when carefully followed, could quite literally save a life. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.